let's see, long story, make it short. When I was a young adult, I was not walking with the Lord. But when I was at university, I studied art history, and I just absolutely loved it. I actually studied art, studio art. The art teacher said to me, you may want to think about another career.
Oh, Mary.
It was soul crushing. So I was like, right, okay, I love the arts, so I'm going to go with art history. Which, anyway, I was hanging around people I shouldn't have been hanging around, and I got myself kicked out of college. And I did not finish university at that time. And through that whole process came to a really alive and vibrant faith. Started attending a church in Washington, D.C. called Christ Our Shepherd. The friends I made at that church, I am still friends with today. And that was a long time ago. That was in the early 90s. Long time ago. And so we stayed in touch. So the friendship piece is really important part of that journey. So long story, I tried various different career paths, eventually went back to that same university, finished my degree in art history, did so much better the second time around because I was focused and motivated. And I could never quite figure out, like, I love the arts. How do I make a living at that? Washington, D.C. is where I'm from. It's not a very artsy town. It's a very culture town, lots of museums. I did work at the National Gallery of Art when I was in college, and hated it. It was a very elitist, very unfriendly atmosphere, and I thought, gosh, I love art so much. Why is it... Why do I keep getting these shut doors? So anyway, I'm just going to skip ahead. I worked for the government for a while then. I went to seminary in 2006 in Oxford at Wycliffe Hall through the Church of England. Studied there, and then it was through that process that I began to see the possibility of integrating the arts with my faith. And I've never sort of given up the hope of being an artist. So I'm a photographer. I love photography. I also do some painting and mixed media and some other stuff. But I was trying to work out, how does my faith and connection to the visual arts, what angle can I take on that? Because you can study that academically, you can study that abstractly. There's lots of churches that have worship arts, which is great. But I was sort of more interested in how is my love of the arts going to reflect something of the love of God to the world? How can I connect my love of arts to other people who don't know Jesus, especially people from other places in the world? And so that got me on a quest. After I finished seminary, I went to University of London, Heathrow College. I did a master's in Christian spirituality, and I looked at the visual arts as a means of spiritual transformation. So not just me and Jesus transforming, becoming like him, but how might I have a heart for the kingdom of God? How might I have a heart for social justice? And how might the arts inform that? So that's what I studied, kind of looking at some of the great saints, Christian spirituality, and then I was on the ordination track in the Church of England, got really, really sick, had to come home, got a horrible diagnosis. Coming home, meaning I left England, I wanted to stay, I was having a great time. Came back to the U.S., and long story short, I got a lot of healing prayer, and God healed me. It was
Mary,
amazing.
what was your diagnosis?
MS. Yeah. So that was it was pretty traumatic. And so after all kinds of, almost a year of lots of tests and poking and prodding and lots of doctor's appointments, and so I haven't had a problem since then, and I'm in good health and mostly in my right mind.
Yeah.
So then I went and worked for the government again, which I had done previously, and then really felt a call to ordained ministry in the Anglican Church in the U.S., which is sort of a different bird, different breed, if you will, than the Church of England. I had an incredibly supportive bishop, and he was very interested in my heart for the arts. And so my heart was to reach people who work in the visual arts, performing arts, because those sorts of people are not going to like wake up one day and say, gee, I want to go to church. Like, I think people in the arts, if they encounter another person of faith, I think that's where your faith can have impact on them. So that was something I started to pursue. Great support from my bishop, but not so much support from my church at that time. Mm-hmm. So I kind of went back. So I haven't figured this out. Long story to make it short. Like, I'm still trying to like work out this connection. But in my teaching and my preaching, I always use the visual arts, and that has been life transforming for some people.
Yeah. Can you tell me, like, how so? How is it being transformed?
Yeah, so like it's an image that just makes people think about God differently, think about their faith differently. So I'll give you an example. I was talking to our like elder board one time, and we were kind of going back on were they going to fund something that was sort of social justice. And I was giving them a talk, and I was showing them Vincent van Gogh's Good Samaritan painting, and I was just doing a meditation with them. It was just, I was a priest on staff. They were the elder board was having a meeting that night. I was doing a short meditation on what it means, to be a Good Samaritan. And I was comparing and contrasting another work of art by another artist that did a painting of the Good Samaritan. And it just, for one person, it just really animated them, and gave them a passion and a voice. That meditation time helped them articulate, gosh, this is what we are to be about as a church and as believers. So it's subtle. It's not always obvious, and it's not always the way that I had sort of thought the arts would work with my faith. I do. So like I said, I lead a lot of retreats. I use the arts in the retreats. That I do, like silent retreats for people, or just contemplative retreats, just helping people hear the voice of God. So often use the arts as a means of helping people discern. Yeah. So I use scripture, obviously, but also sometimes, because we're such a visual generation. Yeah. The other thing I've done is I've done a lot of art tours at the National Gallery of Art. So because it's a publicly funded museum, anyone can give an art, as long as you're a taxpayer, you can give someone an art tour there. So I've done it with Christians, I've done it with non-Christians, ESOL students, Muslims, where I take them through the National Gallery and introduce them to Western culture, but I can also give them an experience of, these are all the examples of women in the Bible. And these are how different artists portrayed them. And you can talk about the story in scripture. You've got the beautiful thing about using older art that's already been around. So I'm doing this from an art historian perspective. Right. Is that, you don't have to worry about copyrights generally. If something's more than 100 years old, you don't have to worry about copyright. So you can use them, talk about them. But so as I've done these tours, I got to meet the bishop of the Anglican Church over the Middle East, and he is an amazing guy. He has a heart for the arts. So this is what he's done. Mm. He's the bishop of Cairo. He's invited imams from the local mosques and they did a joint. He was at the cathedral there in Cairo, and they did like a joint art exhibit. And it was just a great way for people who had never come into a Christian church. So, you have Christians and Muslims working together. They're both being, honest about their faith. So because I was giving an art tour, I found out about this bishop who's doing artsy-fartsy stuff in Cairo.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And so they have that church, they can use that space. Also in this process of thinking about how I work out the arts and my faith and my calling. There's a church in Virginia, kind of more rural area. They have a church that's near university campus. And when they built their church, they built it with the university in mind. What does the university need? There's a lot of art students at that university. So it's a really basic space. So they do their own art exhibits. They let the community do art exhibits. They let the university do art exhibits. But they also they bought a concert grade piano. Yeah. So like they let the community come in and do performances. And, that's where they put their money. And they've built all kinds of amazing relationships with that's in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Wonderful, wonderful church. And just how they're using their building with the arts to serve the community is just fantastic. Yeah. And he's got a level of trust. Like I was walking down the street with him. Aubrey Spears is the name of the priest there. He's a great guy.
Aubrey Spears?
Aubrey Spears, yeah.
S-P-I-E-R or S-P-E?
Or S-P-E-A-R-S.
E-A-R-S, okay.
Yeah, Aubrey is his name, so... yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I love that sense of, the church facilitating a space for local creatives to come and to display their creativity.
Yeah.
So good.
So I am talking too much.
No, I'm loving it.
Oh, it's fascinating.
But another church in our area, Truro Anglican Church, which is in Fairfax, Virginia, Washington, D.C. metro area, they have a space downstairs, and they do, like, every couple months, they have a rotating exhibit there. So that's
so cool.
Yeah, it's great. So there's a lot, depending on what sort of your angle is with the arts, whether that's performing arts, visual arts,
all of
music
it,
arts.
Really.
Yeah. there's so many. Oh, and my husband and I were on a missions trip to Cambodia in January, and we were visiting Svay Pak, which is a place where International Justice Mission had done a raid, in like 2003.
Yeah.
And there's a organization there that now does a lot of anti-trafficking work. So we were walking around looking at their, like, all the things they've done since 2003, which is just completely amazing. And there's 2 girls there who are from California, and I don't have their card at home, but they use music arts as a way of just reaching out to kids in developing countries. They were the coolest young women. They were just so dynamic, and I was like, you two are the coolest. You two are so cool. You have vision, and I love their heart for the world and to share Jesus through the arts in a really useful way.
So can you tell me a bit more about the way that you have used art or seen art as a medium through which God's heart for justice can be communicated?
That is an excellent question. I don't know that I have, but it's something, it's a desire in the back of my head. But I think 2 examples I can think of. So when I was in Oxford, I went to St. Aldate's Church.
Yeah.
And when I was there, they did an art exhibit and all the proceeds went to what's the charity there that helps the persecuted church? Anyway, so the auction was in support of the persecuted church. So I just thought that was, one unique way to do that. So people could just come in, bid on the art, and then, but that's hard on the artists, right? Because the artists don't get any money out of that. But it's a way for people to, it's thinking about tithing in another way.
But Mary, you remember during the Depression, what was that photographer, that lady, Margaret?
Dorothea Lange?
It could have been Dorothea Lange. Her picture of Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
Remember that photograph really turned people's hearts? So, or the girl fleeing napalm, that photograph out of Vietnam.
Yeah.
So art being used for justice. As far as photography, we've got some really strong examples. But I can't think of fine art. I'm having a hard time thinking of fine art things, but definitely photography.
But it's a worthy thing to think about. There's a book written by a South African Christian, if I'm getting that right. And he's the only person I know from an academic perspective who's written about art and the visual arts and social justice, and how during apartheid art was used in a way to help change people's minds. So it's a fairly advanced book, but it's the one sort of prime example I can think of art and social justice.
Yeah. What's the title?
Again, on my bookshelf at home.
Okay.
De Gruchy, D-U, so it's like a Dutch name. Gruchy. De Gruchy is the author. And, I could look it up on my phone. So that's 2 things I gotta get you.
Right.
2 things to email you.
Awesome. So, I am passionate about, collaborating with other creatives.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how one can make that collaborative effort effective. How can creatives come together and collaborate in an effective way?
So I think a lot of it depends on your space and geography, because I think God is so amazingly creative how he works. And so what works in Southern California is not going to necessarily work in Washington DC. Part of ongoing ministry is, I think, one of the most important things that we need as believers is discernment. So what is God calling us to do this season of life in this place?
Yeah.
Because it's just going to look really different. So how you collaborate with other creatives, it's just going to look really different. There's a guy, again, of course, can't think of his name. He's a Church of England. He's in the Church of England ordained. He's actually from South America, and he's just this great big personality. And he has a call to the arts in London, to creatives, to people in fashion. He has a broad brushstroke of people that he wants to appeal to, and he does it. He's fascinating. Yeah, he's just such a neat guy. So I think of someone like him, that just wouldn't work anywhere else. That wouldn't even work in New York, but it totally works in London. Mm-hmm. And then there's, there are chaplains to art museums. That works in England. That doesn't work here because everyone here is so afraid of church and state mixing. They're terrified of that. But somehow that works in the UK. How you collaborate with musicians or artists, I mean, that's just, I hate to say that, but part of the fun is like working it out. It's trial and error.
Yeah.
It's trying and going, oh, well, that part works great. This other part, not so much. And so, some of that is that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Discernment and trial and error.
Yeah. Have you yourself collaborated much?
I have done some collaborating. Like one of the more fun things I got to do with when I was priest on staff at a church was working with the director of worship, and they were doing Handel's Messiah, and we had a big, and it's a very traditional church, traditional music, so they're trying to shake it up a little bit. So while Handel's Messiah was going on in the background, and you have the brass, and you have all the singers singing their hearts out, we flashed up images that related to the song.
Yeah.
And so that was a really fun collaboration project with lots of different people.
We did Handel's Messiah to ballet one time, like in less than a month. Like our pastor came up with the idea, and none of us had boundaries, so we all said yes.
And worked your heart out. Yeah. So collaboration takes time. Good point, fun.
Any words of wisdom for Hannah on just what you know now that you wish you knew when you were 18?
Like, I wish I hadn't set it aside. I wish I would have pursued it.
Pursued
more
art?
The arts, yeah. Pursued the arts and God's heart for the arts instead of saying, oh no, I must go make a living. I mean, one does need to make a living.
Yes.
And pay the rent. That is important.
Yeah.
But I wish I hadn't neglected it. And God put this in your heart. This is how He made you. And so He will make a way for you.
Yeah.
So have confidence that, the author of you, Jesus, has something that only you can do in the world. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Can you tell us some of the biggest discoveries you've made about God's heart for creativity over the years?
Oh, that is a good question. What have I discovered about God? I think I just love what of God's character. Like, half the fun to me about looking at art in a museum is also learning about the painter and their story.
Yeah. And
oftentimes those stories are just as interesting, in some cases more interesting than the art they produce.
Yeah.
And to see how God works in their lives has been a great I think just learning about God that way too has been a great surprise. I don't know, I think I'd have to ponder the question for a while.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mary, so much for taking this time.
Absolutely.
It really
quite
means a lot.
Joy.